The things that I went through because I was strong enough to go through them.
Mm-hmm.
That if I didn't go through them, somebody else would have. And it would have been either in my family or not in my family, but I was the one that was strong enough to go through this so that I can come out of it and be able to, like now, be able to say, I survived this.
Welcome to The Bright Side of Life, a podcast where people share their personal stories of struggles, pain, and grief, but through all of that, they are still able to find the joys in life. Hello, and welcome to today's episode of The Bright Side of Life. I am your host, Melissa Bright. Today I'm talking with Ashley, who's going to share her story of childhood trauma and her healing process she had to go through to get where she is now. I would like to add before we get started that this podcast may act as a trigger for some people as it covers a topic of sensitive nature. Ashley, thank you so much for being here. When did everything start for you as a child?
3 years old, Christmas Eve, I was getting ready to celebrate like anybody else, going to bed, waiting for Santa Claus to come the next morning. And that was the very first night that a family member had decided that I was at the appropriate age for him to explore my body and his. That was the very first time I was sexually molested. It was it was snowing outside, and I remember because that's the only thing I was paying attention to.
And you do have memories of
I
that?
actually, I remember the very first time because it was probably the very first traumatic experience I had gone through. Anything before that, I don't really remember, but that was the moment that my entire life changed.
What did your life look like after that?
Because that was an ongoing thing. I lived with the person that this happened with. I lived with his family, and I was there pretty much, with him all the time. So this became a almost nightly thing, and it was a nightly thing from the time I was 3 until I was 8, and it was after I was 8, he actually moved out. So then it wasn't so much nightly. It became kind of a sporadic thing, like holidays, until I was 10. So from 3 to 8, it was normal. It became a normal part of my life. It was this thing where I knew it was going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So it was one of those things where I would go to bed in my room, but I would wake up, and what I would do is I would actually hide underneath my kitchen table. So that's where I would hide.
Right.
So when I would wake up the next morning, everybody else would be curious as to why I'm hiding underneath, sleeping underneath the kitchen table. But for me, it was my security. Is That's where, my family was. They can't, he can't get me here.
Mm-hmm.
But that was the breaking moment
Yeah.
to everything else.
Did you never talk to anybody or go to anybody for help or just to tell them what was going on or?
I did actually. I talked to my mom, and my mom, which is a subject all on its own. My mother, before she left, she told me that it happens, and you know, she didn't believe that he would do this. Try to talk to other family members, and no one would believe it. I was making stories up, and I actually was told once that it was my fault. Even though it was just a child, and looking back on it now, I'm sitting here going, how can someone think that a 5-year-old would actually, bring this on? But
Right.
it was my fault, and it was my fault because of the way I was raised. My mother was a very promiscuous person, and she raised me in a household that had my mother was a working girl.
Mm-hmm.
So I was around that all the time, and they thought that I was just repeating and playing out what I saw. So
Sure.
for them, it was my fault. I did this. So no one actually did anything at all. my entire life. It became the big family secret.
You said it stopped at 8 because he had moved out or he was no
Mhm.
longer in the home. What happened after that? I know you had we had talked before that you did start seeing a therapist at 10, right?
I started seeing a therapist at 10, and the breaking point was like at 8 years old. He moved out and moved in with different family members. My mother actually decided that she was going to go to recovery, and she left. She never came back though. So when she left, she kind of just abandoned her children and just left. And the father that I had wasn't ready to have me. So I was kind of stuck in this limbo
Mhm.
where nobody wanted me. And the family members that did have me, it was hard for them to take care of me. So I had to go through therapy to deal with the abandonment issues with my mother. So we started going to therapy when I was 10, and it was rather difficult because I had people who didn't believe I should have been in therapy to help me, go through this because of, the lifestyle that my mother had me in, and the the upbringing that I had with her. And when I was 10, when I started going through therapy, I also started um, kind of mimicking my mom's lifestyle.
Mhm.
That's when I started drinking. And that was the first time I actually started smoking too. I started getting high when I was 10. So that was going through therapy kind of pushed me into the direction of growing up too fast.
Yeah.
Uh,
How did
but
you end up in therapy? Was it who made that choice for you?
my grandparents felt that it was because of my mom leaving, that it would be best for me to talk to someone about it and try to kind of hash out the problems that I had with my mom and the lifestyle that I lived with her. Because of her, it came out later on that it was one of those things where she would have gentlemen over, her clients,
Mhm.
and they would pay to watch, her daughters take showers or take a bath. And we were under, 3, 4 years old. So it was being in that situation. My grandmother and grandfather figured that it would be best for me to go through therapy to try to kind of help me, which it didn't.
I was curious if you were, yes, I can't wait to talk to somebody about all this, or no, I don't even want to go talk about it.
I did not want to talk about it. Honestly, up until probably about 10 years ago, I would not talk about it at all to anybody. I've had different therapists throughout my childhood, and they all, for me, it was they all geared on towards one thing, and it was they were pushing me to talk about one subject, and there was so many different things that had been bothering me and that I needed to talk about, that none of them could actually grasp everything all at once. The process was just not working for me.
In a way, I guess it kind of put a bad taste in your mouth, I guess about therapy and if it even, worked or helped. Did you try to tell the therapist or ask the therapist and say like, hey, I have a whole nother side of me that I need to share and I need to get out and I need to, but they just keep focusing on that. Is that how it kind of went?
They did. They didn't want to focus on like the sexual abuse that I had encountered. They didn't want to focus on my issues with, the other side of the family. That, for me, it felt like they didn't want me. It felt like they didn't want me to be a part of their family. Instead, they wanted to focus on the abandonment from my mother and try to push me through that. And even
Mm-hmm.
though I had that issue, I also had the issue of, well, my father didn't want me. He doesn't understand what I'm going through. And my grandparents can't really take care of me. I mean, they did a great job, don't
Mm-hmm.
get me wrong, my grandparents did a great job, but they were older and they already raised their children, um, to the point of like trying to explain to, I was already drinking
Mm-hmm.
and doing drugs at that time too. So they didn't want to push and ask the right questions. And for me, I think the point of breaking from therapy was my stepmother got us into church, hoping that that might, help us. And I was told that during one of the group counseling sessions that I didn't need the church, I needed a therapist, but therapy wasn't helping.
Mm-hmm.
So I felt lost, like no one cared. You
Right.
know, no one wanted to listen, no one cared. They just pushed me over into a corner and figured that I would just figure things out on myself.
Therapy now. So you said it was about 10 years ago that you finally felt
Hmm.
like you either found the right therapist or they started asking the right questions. What was that like?
Actually, I stopped doing therapy when I was 14. 14 was the age that the rest of my life kind of took off, and I went down to another spiral. And I stopped doing therapy when I was 14. 10 years ago, I realized that truly felt comfortable with myself and realized that the things that I went through because I was strong enough to go through them.
Hmm.
That if I didn't go through them, somebody else would have. And it would have been either in my family or not in my family, but I was the one that was strong enough to go through this so that I can come out of it and be able to, like now, be able to say, I survived this.
Yep.
And if I can do it with how messed up, my drug addiction was and everything was, then, you know, anyone else can too.
Yeah.
So it
S-
was that realization though.
You started drinking and doing drugs at the age of 10.
Hmm.
And when did you, because I know now that you are sober, so when was that moment or how long were you doing drugs and alcohol and what moment did that all change that you knew that that had to stop?
I stopped cold turkey, completely cold turkey, when I was 17. It was right after um, I was 17, and or right after I turned 18. I'm sorry, right after I turned 18, and it was the moment I found out I was pregnant. The moment I found out I was pregnant, and I found out when I was very, very much under the influence. I went home and I sat there and I go, okay, do I not care
Hmm.
or do I change? And the first thing that went through my head was, I'm not going to be a parent like my parent was.
Right.
And I stopped cold turkey and I have not touched. And I have gotten to the point where I can actually have a glass of wine now, but I haven't touched anything.
Right.
I won't even take over the counter medications. I just refuse to put anything harmful in my body
Right.
except for coffee.
So you didn't have any outside help in getting sober at all except for the moment that you became pregnant.
Mm-mm. It was the dedication of knowing that I can grow up and I can raise my child to be as messed up as I was through
Hmm.
my childhood and have my parents' influence, or I can stop and give my kid a better life. Excuse me, give my kid a better life and give them a parent that I never had. That was what made me do it.
Were there ever any moments that you wanted to turn back or you thought maybe like, oh man, this just sounds really good to go get high right now?
Oh
Um,
yeah, all the time, especially when, um, especially considering the fact that after I had her, and I had her when I was 18, I was a mom of two before I was even 21.
mhm,
So I I had that struggle, and I had that struggle for years of, just one time, if I go out and just do it one time, I know I can stop again. Um, but looking at, knowing that I would be putting them through the same thing that I went through, watching my mother, getting high, watching my mother passed out drunk, not being able to provide for them the way that I needed it, I couldn't do it.
mhm,
I did have slip ups. I did begin drinking again for a short period of time, and I felt miserable. I wasn't doing what I knew I had to do, and um, and what was really funny is I never wanted to be a parent. I never wanted to be a mom, never wanted to have someone else I'm responsible for. I wasn't even responsible for myself. I'm still not.
right,
I still stop and wonder, like, am I doing this right? I don't
right,
know. But that's been 23. My first one was almost 24 years ago,
yeah,
and I managed to do it. Now I have a great support system. Now, and my kids know. They know my addictions and they know my struggles and they know what my entire life is because I've been honest with them from day one. So they know, and they're my biggest support,
Yeah.
which is awesome.
Right.
Like, now I have that system.
Was this almost like a defining moment in terms of like your other family who for so long, they didn't have your back and they didn't support you? Did they see anything like, oh man, she's really cleaning up her life or cleaning up her act, or were they just not in the picture anymore? Or
I attempted and I tried. I did find my mom a couple years ago, and I tried to get in good graces with all of my family. And there was, I mean, the history with them is so traumatic. Like the deceitfulness and the lies and the breakdown of not understanding the things that I needed at that time. And I know that they did the best that they could. They thought they could. I know that they were trying, but with me already being so messed up, there was no way of connecting to me.
mm-hmm.
That I tried to reach out. I even try now. I mean, we are very civil, but we don't have a relationship at all. And it took me a good part of my adulthood to understand that that's okay. It really is okay because they know that I love them. I know that they love me, but there's so much damage that we will never have, family outings, we'll never have family holidays together, and that's okay
Mm-hmm.
because, we understand that it's fine.
So what do you feel that, now being clean and sober and having your child, what are you most proud of, like for yourself, that helps you keep going every day?
There's a few things actually. The When I was, and this goes back to a whole nother situation. 'Cause like I said, there's several different situations, but I got involved with um, a person that in today's society, in today's world, if you looked at it, if it happened now, um, I would be considered child trafficking, basically. It,
Mm-hmm.
it would be considered the pedophilia type situation because I was only 15
Mm-hmm.
and he was much, much, much older in his 30s.
Mm-hmm.
So, and he's actually, the reason why I am the person that I am today. The moment that I can probably say that I am most proud of, and yes, being with my, having my children was the most awesome experience that I've ever had to, go through,
Mm-hmm.
was actually the moment that I left their father. That was the moment because I went from growing up into a household that was completely wrong, that was physically, mentally, and sexually abusive, to living out on the streets for about a year, to meeting him and him giving me a place to live and giving me a job, and him manipulating, taking over, and molding me into a person that I wasn't. And even though I got pregnant and I had my children, I got clean, I was still living a life that wasn't mine. I was still living, being someone that it wasn't me. I'm a really good person, and I was living in a world that wasn't meant for me. So I was scared to leave. Most people will sit there and go, if you're in an abusive relationship, that you can just leave, but they don't understand that there's fear in that situation, that you are actually afraid to leave. You fear your life or your children's life. And I was told that if I ever left, that I would never see my children again. And I could not bear that. There was no way I could bear that. So I stayed. And my breaking point was the moment I turned 30 years old. I did the most outrageous thing and I jumped on a Greyhound bus, didn't tell anyone. Felt horrible because I was leaving my children and not telling them, but I jumped on a Greyhound bus because I had to prove that I was an independent, strong female. And I did. I went to California, I went to Colorado, and 2 weeks later I came back. And within 2 years, I was living on my own. I worked out, slowly getting everything that I needed together, and I moved out. And that was that first night, even though I didn't have my kids with me, but that first night was the first night of true independence I've ever had in my entire life. That was the proudest moment because then I knew that I can do this on my own with absolutely no help. And I'm now responsible. I am actually responsible for myself.
Right.
And I was in my 30s. And it was the first moment where I actually became responsible for myself solely. And it was amazing.
Were you scared at the same time, like still in the back of your head, like, is everything going to be okay when I get back?
No, I was horrified. Oh, I was so horrified. And I've battled drug addiction. I have battled suicide addiction or suicide attempts. I have battled alcoholism and physical and mental abuse and sexual abuse. And I was more terrified of coming back and walking back into that house after I left than I have been of anything else because I didn't know what was going to happen. I did not know what I would be walking into. And he was a part of the mental and physical abuse, more mental, but he was a part of the mental abuse. And even though not 100% of it was bad, it was, my kids actually see it now. But walking back into that house, I was terrified.
Mm-hmm.
I actually had to let a friend know that if you don't hear from me in 24 hours, you might want to be worried.
Right.
So it was very terrifying. But he was also getting older and he was going through a lot of issues as well. And I ended up getting him help, getting him into a therapist and getting him into a psychiatric hospital for a while to get him on medication so that he can get help. And during that process of him being away at the hospital, I was actually able to separate my life from him. So I took advantage of that moment to build my life up without him so that when I could move, I could.
So when you first got back, was he there? Was he in the house? What happened on the day that you
Yep.
got back?
He was there. So were my children, luckily, because he was never, ever violent around the children. So I was thankful for that. And it was pretty much I miss you. I can't, I'm so glad that you're here. I'm so glad that you're alive. Very loving, very tenderness for the first 24 hours. After that, it was the accusations of why I left and, the little small comments about, the same thing as being a child, I'm just like my mother. That has that thing of just like your mother has followed me my entire life until I was able to break that. And I actually broke that with my mother. That was really funny. Because when I met her, I'm like, yeah, I'm nothing like you,
Right.
and I was able to tell her that firsthand. Um,
And what
but
did she say to that?
that only happened. Um, she she argued with me for a little while, saying that I am just like her. In a lot of ways, I am.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very strong, and that's the one thing she is she is strong. And I don't take, I didn't know that I was that strong. I didn't know that I was that strong until, it's been almost 11 years now. 11 years now is when I realized that I was really that strong. And that was the only thing I really took after her was her strength.
And so let's go back to the day. I kind of interrupted you before. So the first day he was really nice, and then the days after that were a little bit of a different story. Did you still have in your head that you just knew I'm leaving? I don't care what he says, what he's saying, or
Yeah.
did you have moments
I
that
had
you were
been
going to stay?
I had actually been plotting my escape, I would say, since I was about 25. I tried to see ways that I could, but it was always the point where there was no way that I could. Um, Everything was in his name. I had nothing. Bank accounts, any kind of money, anything was all in his name. So he controlled everything. So there was no way of leaving. Um, After I came back, I did think for like the first maybe 2 or 3 months, I was having those thoughts. And even after I left, like the first week, I would say, did I make the right decision? Did I do this? I'm doing this for myself and for my children. I'm mainly doing it because I need to, but I'm doing this because I can't have my kids live like that anymore. And
Hmm.
I knew that I would not have my kids with me for the first year, because I lived in a 1 bedroom little apartment, and I needed to do something. And for the first week, it was difficult. I had absolutely nothing. Our agreement, he actually did help me leave, which was shocking, but I explained to him that if I don't leave, it's either I leave or you're going to go to my funeral, because I was at that point. Like I could not do it anymore. And he knew that I had already attempted suicide several times before, and he knew that the most recent time was, almost a year before that I left, that I was serious. It's either I leave now and I save myself, or you're going to have to go to my funeral with my children. And I don't want that to happen. So the agreement that when I left was he had to make sure the house was, the location I was living in was safe. So he had to approve of it. Fine. If this is the kind of control that you need, fine.
Right.
So he had to approve. He paid all the bills for like the first 6 months. And that was just to make sure that I stayed in the one spot. I didn't leave. I didn't just get up and, poof, gone.
Sure.
But I didn't want that. I said no. You know, he agreed that because he had all my money in his bank account as well. Um, First and last month's rent was taken, and I got my own private bank account, and I was able to go out and get my own job and do everything on my own. Because before this, I was a stay-at-home mom. I had no reason to work. He did,
Hmm.
but it was phone calls every night, him calling and texting every couple hours. It was still, he still had that control. He had that control until last year, and not really so much control. It was still he still referred to us, and he's married now, and so am I. We
Hmm.
both are remarried, but he still referred to us as we are family. And I, even trying to get him to understand that we're not,
Right.
he still had that. And it was last year when my son goes, for my birthday this year, I only want one thing. I said, what's that? He goes, block my father.
Oh,
That's
wow.
what he wanted for his birthday. He's like, just block him from everything. And I did. And
Yeah.
I mean, I talk to him now only in emergencies. If the kids
Hmm.
need, something's wrong with the kids, or he's got grandkids from a previous child, from his older son, I'll help out the kids. I'll give them. I got them Christmas gifts last year, so that's the only time that we talk now, and it's been like that for almost a year, and it's great. It's it really is, because we don't talk about personal stuff. We don't talk about anything. It's at first, even after I got remarried, we tried to make the whole family thing work and have him come over for Christmas and do the whole. It just doesn't work when there's someone there who actually manipulated and controlled you. You still have that underlying fear, almost anger and hatred towards them. And I didn't want to have that hatred towards him. He is the father of my kids. I have to acknowledge that,
Hmm.
but I didn't want to hate him.
Yeah.
And I still don't. I don't hate that. That's the one thing that a lot of people don't understand, is that with everything that has happened with, the person that, sexually abused me as a child, with my parents leaving, with my parents, with one set of my parents not doing what they needed to do, and with the other set of parents abandoning me. I don't hate any of them. Like I have no hatred for them.
Was that something that you had to learn?
No, it was a long process, because I did hate them. I
Hmm.
did have so much anger and so much hate. And the problem that it was doing is that it was making me miserable. It was making me sick. It
Right.
was ruining moments that could be, because I mean, if your first moment of having any kind of abuse happens on Christmas Eve, you take that holiday and you don't like that holiday. You don't want anything to do with that holiday. That holiday becomes a painful memory of all of the abuse that you go through and the lies that this family is keeping together. My daughter was born on Christmas Day. So the one day of the year that I completely hate, that I grew up hating my entire life, happens to be the day that my daughter was born.
I just got
And that was like,
goosebumps.
it was like, I can't hate this day anymore because it's also the day that I gave birth to this child. And she really was my saving grace. Because, I
Yeah.
mean, I was 18, I was a kid. I had no idea what I was doing. And we grew up together. We actually grew up together.
Yep.
Um, and she's now 23 and she is one of my best friends, and we talk about everything together. And we have no secrets. Like, one of the big things that I made sure to do was I told them everything that happened to me so that they knew that if mom's having a bad day and I can't function, it's because my brain is just not working. And this is why. It's not because of you. It's because I have all this trauma that I'm trying to overcome, and it still affects me.
Right.
Yeah, the one day that I hate the most out of the entire year happens to be the one day that I give birth to my firstborn. And it's like,
Yeah.
really?
Yeah, that's you can't make that
And
kind of stuff up, but that's just like some things are just meant to be because maybe that was the some way of now you can hopefully replace that awful memory and with something else, you know?
we do. And what we do is we specialize, we hold that day as that's her birthday. We don't use it as that's Christmas. It's
Hmm.
that's her birthday. The entire world celebrates her birthday. So when she was little, we actually told her that,
Right.
um, you know, the Christmas trees are for you, because we didn't want to explain to her just yet what was going on.
Right.
Um, but we hold that day as her birthday instead of having it as a family holiday of Christmas, um, because everybody else gets a birthday celebration and she gets born on Christmas. I mean, it's kind of a
Right.
rough one for a kid. So we just made changes. You know, we did without the whole Santa Claus thing, and we kept it with just birthday theme, and it
Yeah.
worked. And and she understands that now why. But
Right.
it was yeah, that was probably the breaking point of going, really. Like, of all days of the year, and she wasn't due until January. But so of
Wow.
all the days of the year, it just had to be that day.
What do your days look like now? You know, are you still healing?
I think every day, if once you go through something traumatic, every day is a healing process. Every day is a day that you wake up and you go, okay, I'm going to go through this day. Because after that, every day is a successful day. Um, it's a little different now where I don't have the urge, growing up with having the urge of like doing the drugs or the drinking, the cutting. And so I got tattoos instead of doing the cutting. So I found a way of, taking one out and replacing it with something else.
Mhm.
Um, I became a stepmom again 10 years ago. So, and those kids are actually younger. So it's kind of like becoming a new mom all over again.
Mhm.
And so I put all of my energy into, when those kids are here, making sure that I'm that parent to them,
Yeah.
which has helped. But I do suffer from anxiety. I suffer from extreme anxiety from, driving. Um, I do have things that I can't go through.
Mhm.
Um, in the morning I'll wake up and I'll think that it would be a great day to just stay in bed all day and just, sleep because I don't want to face the world. I don't want to do this today. But then I remember that I have to get a kid ready for, this class or that class, or I have to, my husband makes it to where I'm the only driver in the house. So we only have one car and I need the car during the day. So if he has to go to work at 10 a.m., I have to get up to take him to work if
Right.
I want the car. We purposely put things in place to where it makes me do things. He is probably, and even though my children have been there for me throughout everything, he is probably the one person in my entire life who has taught me that it's okay. it really is okay when you're having a bad day and your mind is going racing from A to Z, and you can't think straight, and you just want to cry. It's okay, because you need that. And so he has accepted 100%, and he knows everything as well. One of my big things was, honesty is always the best. So, telling him up front, these are my issues, these are my traumas, this is what I'm going through, and this is why I suffer through this. He's like, okay, we can work with this. So just getting up. Coffee is my stimulant now instead of drugs. I will drink, coffee in the morning. I make sure that I do a, steady workout. Yoga, music is huge, and learning new things. One of the things I've always told my kids and I've told other people is that you're never too old to learn new things. I am now learning a new language, and pretty soon I'll learn a new instrument. And I do it not for any other reason, but it occupies your mind. And plus, your learning things should be a process that you do every day. So you should always, want to learn something new. So I've taken up Romanian class, and I'm going to learn the violin.
That is
I don't
awesome.
know why.
No, that is awesome.
I figured violins are pretty, and I could learn that. And Romanian is, something traditional for me. So I figured Romanian and violin will be next. And then from there, my husband's actually learning Japanese. And
That's really
one kid
cool.
learning German. So we kind of just learning,
Yep.
always keeping your mind stimulated with something. It helps, because the moment you have a lull period and the moment that you get too relaxed and doing nothing, the cravings come back. And even though I've been clean for 23 years, I still have moments where it's like, I could easily go out and just, drink and continue drinking. One of the big things is I do go out to the bar every once in a while, maybe twice a year, with a bunch of girlfriends. And I do grab a drink. The good thing is that I'm with people that I know, and they know that my limit is only one. And I go to a place that I know, and the bartender knows my limit is only one. So even if I ask for another one, I wouldn't be given it to. Like, they wouldn't give it to me.
Yeah.
So knowing your limit too, because you don't have to cut out, especially like with the drinking. Once you're clean for a good many years, you can get comfortable with having a glass of wine with dinner, or having, a beer at a barbecue or something like that. But knowing that you had one, that's all you're going to get. And that can be difficult at times. Being strong helps.
Absolutely. I'm going to ask you two different questions, and this is going to kind of wrap up our interview. The first one I know I kind of told you about before, but the other one I didn't. So if it, takes a minute to kind of think on it, I totally understand. So the first question that I wanted to ask you is if you had any resources that you wanted to share with the audience of anything that you have went through in your life that really really helped you to get through them, or any advice that you could give anybody that's listening that maybe has went through similar things.
If you are a child, or you are under the age of 18, there is local resources for children. And if you can find those local resources, find them. It would vary from state to state, but the youth programs that they have set up for are really good programs. They really do help. I did go through a youth program locally here when I was a runaway, and that is something that will help. I'm not one to say that you should or should not do therapy, because everybody takes therapy differently. It didn't work for me because I didn't have that openness. But having support and people who actually have your back, people who actually believe you and who want to support you, whether it be friends, family, it doesn't matter. But even if it's just one person that has your back, because that's the one thing that I didn't have. I never had someone in my corner, even though I had people that said they were, but the people that said they were in my corner were also manipulating me and controlling me. they made things worse.
Yeah.
But having someone who truly has your back, that when you're in trouble, you can go to them and without judgment, without forcing, anything from you. One of the big things that most people, they say that, getting or seeking help outside, having something that takes your mind away from it, having something that fulfills your time, and having a hobby, as crazy as it might be to some people, reading, music, it doesn't matter. I make candles. I actually studied and decided that I'm just going to make candles. It makes me feel good. They smell great, and I can give them away as gifts. But having a hobby that takes your time and takes your mind and puts your mind in someplace else, because the more you slowly stop thinking about it, the more you can actually grow. So as far as referrals or references, it's really hard to say, go through therapy, find the best therapist. I can't say medication is good. Some people it is. I've been medication free since I was 14. Some people medication helps. Sometimes I think that I should be on medication. Just to help. Finding something that actually makes you feel good. And then learning how to forgive yourself and not blaming yourself, because we feel whenever we go through something like this, we feel like it's our fault. It's our fault this happened. We're the reason, we're the cause. And if we can say, I'm not the reason, I'm not the cause, I forgive myself for even thinking that, you actually learn how to accept it. And accepting it doesn't mean forgetting it. It just means that you accept that this happened. Like anything else in life, it happened. We can actually move on from this. It's a difficult process. I mean, I'm now 42, and it has taken me all the way up until this point and I still suffer from a lot of the stuff that I went through. I am not angry anymore. And once you get through that anger, it's just like you're okay. So learning how to accept it, not blaming yourself.
That is great advice. Okay, so my very last question, and this is the one I didn't prepare you for, but I'm sure you'll be great. Obviously, the show is called The Bright Side of Life. If you could explain in your own words, what would your own definition of the bright side of life be?
That's actually a very easy question. The bright side of life is seeing other people for their true beauty and seeing the world differently. We experience life and we experience trauma, but that doesn't mean we have to close our eyes to everything else. And accepting ourselves for who we are and what we have gone through is the ability to see other people and see the truth and see the beauty in everything else. When you go through something hard, you see the ugly in things. You see the ugly in people. You see the pain. And we can see the ugly, or we can look just a little bit deeper and we can actually see that even the most cruelest things in life has some beauty in it. A lot of people think that I'm crazy for thinking that way, but if I didn't see the beauty in everything, I didn't see the beauty, and there is beauty in everything that I went through. There is a beautiful thing that happened with everything that I went through, and I have 2 kids. I grew from that, and the beauty is that I'm such a positive person now that I can see that. The bright side of life is knowing that not everything out there is ugly, not everything out there is pain and negative, and that there is truly beautiful things in this world. You just have to look slightly to the corner, slightly to the left, but you will see it. But that would be my definition of the bright side of life, is that there really is a bright side to everything.
Yes. And Ashley, I can't thank you enough for coming on here and sharing your story. It is very, very much appreciated. I know listeners are going to be able to relate to you. And so I just want to thank you again.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Bright Side of Life. I hope you enjoyed Ashley's story. She's been through so much in her life, and it's awesome she still has such a great outlook on life. And it also means a lot to me that you're here. So if you like this or any of the episodes, be sure to subscribe. Lastly, if you know someone that may need to hear this story, please share it with them. We never know if this is the one that puts hope back in their heart.